Major key melodies are created using notes from the major scale. This means you have 7 notes to try when writing your melodies. For example, here are the 7 notes in the G major scale: G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. When it comes to major key melodies, the root or tonic note and the third note are particularly important. Now you might be wondering how to use these 7 notes to write a melody. The easiest way to write a melody is by using chord notes. The chords, also known as the harmony, influence or colour the notes in a melody, which is why this relationship is significant in songwriting. Because the notes are already being played, there is no conflict between the harmony and the melody. Let's now look at how this relationship works. If you look at a lot of popular songs, you'll see how the chords directly influence the melody with the choice of notes. If you have an existing major key chord progression, you can start with this and create a melody for it. Each chord will be constructed with several notes, and whilst that chord is playing, you can use these notes to create a melody. For example, a basic major key chord progression uses the chords 1, 4, and 5. In the key of G major, these chords would be G major, C major, and D major. G major has the notes G, B, and D, C major has the notes C, E, and G, and D major has the notes D, F sharp, and A. In the next example, I'll construct a simple melody using only these chord tones. The G major and C major chords share the G note, so also listen out for how this sounds when it is held over the chord change. This is a common technique in melodies. Want more major keys to try out? 7 easy songwriting keys are available to make your chord progression writing a breeze. Don't waste any more time searching. Go to majorkeychords.com now and download your free guide today. Link is also in the description. Even if you are only using chord notes, there are a few things you can do to make your melodies more interesting. When creating melodies, it is important to consider the shape of the pattern. Melodies can move downwards or upwards, in small steps or big leaps. Balancing the movement or shape of the melody is another important part of creating and maintaining interest. Also remember that you can go up or down into different octaves whilst using your notes. Here's a 1, 2, 4, 5 example with leaps and steps into different octaves. If you play each of the notes of a chord one after the other, ascending or descending, you call it an arpeggio. Arpeggios can reinforce the harmony as they are using the same notes in a short period of time. You may have also heard them used in guitar solos or when playing chords on guitar. Another thing to think about in your melodies is breaks. Breaks allow a melody to breathe and break up your phrases. They can also allow you to create question and answer or call and response sections. Here's the previous example with some more rests and an arpeggio. You can think of your chord note melody like a skeleton or scaffold. Take that and then look to use some of the non-chord notes to fill in the gaps. Where the chord notes were really safe, the non-chord notes add some tension. Tension is really important in music as it creates intrigue, interest, and character. Where a note appears in a bar can have an impact on its effect. This is particularly important with the tense notes that aren't in the underlying chord. When landing on a new chord, if you go straight to the tense note, it has a greater impact than if it appears after you have heard the chord and possibly chord notes in the melody. Listen to that in the next example, once again played over the 1, 2, 4, 5 progression. At the beginning of the video, I said that the root note and third note are particularly important in major scale melodies. In the next example, I'm going to try and highlight these notes to make them more prominent. There are a couple of ways you can do this. The first is by placing notes on strong beats in a bar. If you play notes on a strong beat, then they are felt more and stand out. In a 4/4 time signature, with 4 beats in a bar, this would be beats 1 and 3, with the first beat being the strongest. 4/4 is the most popular time signature and is what I've used in the examples so far. The other way to highlight a note is by making it the highest in the melody. Another thing you can do to make your melody sound distinct from the harmony is by avoiding the root note of the chord, particularly as you have just changed chords. I'm going to once again use the 1, 2, 4, 5 progression to demonstrate these techniques. Its main feature is a repeating 3-note phrase. It has the first and third notes I discussed. The third note is always the highest note and is heard on beat 3. This really makes it stand out. The one note G is also played as the first note in 3 of the bars. This makes this note stand out as well. It also introduces the idea of repeating a phrase over several chords. This is a common melody technique. Listen to how the feel of the notes changes with each chord, even though the melody notes are the same. This is because the notes in the underlying chords change, and therefore the relationship with the melody changes. Something you may have seen in songs is the use of borrowed chords. This is where chords from a parallel key are used in the current key. A parallel key has the same root or tonic note, so with the examples in the key of G major, you could borrow from G minor, G Mixolydian, G Dorian, etc. This introduces chromatic notes to the song that are outside of the existing key. These tense alien notes can be very noticeable in your melodies. But as discussed earlier, if you use chord notes, then they feel safer. A common borrowed chord in major key progressions is flat 7. If you want to learn more about this, then there is a video in the playlist at the end of this video. Look at the following example with the chords 1, flat 7, 4, 5. There is a single chromatic note F. It is the only chromatic note used. It falls on beat 2 of the second bar, so it's not prominent, and it features in the underlying borrowed chord. Have a listen to how something feels different with this chord and note, and yet it doesn't sound out of place. The rhythmic element of a melody is almost more important than the notes themselves. Playing all the melody notes for the same duration would become boring. You may have noticed this with the previous examples. There are many ways to divide up each bar to create interesting rhythms for your melody. Let's look at a few ways now. With a 4/4 time signature, you have 4 beats in each bar. Varying note lengths helps create interest and can be used to highlight certain notes. You can sustain the tension by increasing note length of non-chord notes. Listen to this in the next example. The opposite is also true. If you shorten the time on non-chord notes, such as making them passing notes, then you reduce tension. Here's an example of this. Notes that fall between beats reduce monotony and add interest. This is also known as syncopation. Here's an example of a syncopated rhythm. In another video on the channel, I created the chords for a song in the key of G major. It will be linked in the playlist at the end of this video. It contains borrowed chords and chord inversions. Chord inversions have the same notes as standard chords, but just put a different note in the bass. I've used different techniques from this video to create a melody for the song. See if you can spot which ones appear in different parts of the song. Also be aware of where the lowest and highest notes are. I save lower notes for the verses and higher notes for the chorus. This helps the chorus to stand out and elevates it above the rest of the song. Follow along, listen to the melody, and then have a go at writing your own major key melody. You've learned how to write a melody, but you need to be able to write the rest of a major key song. Watch the playlist on screen now to master major key songwriting.